I will never forget the call from my sister-in-law in Florida on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, letting me know that we finally had a baby boy in our family. Named for my wife's maternal grandfather, we will always associate Sam with the new year, apples and honey, and the gathering of family. Sammy's birthday coincides with the birthday of the world, Yom Harat Olam, one of the names by which Rosh Hashanah is known in Jewish tradition. On this Rosh Hashanah, 5780, Sammy stands well over 6 feet tall. He recently celebrated his 18th birthday. You see, Sammy was one of the babies born in the shadow of the World Trade Center destruction. Some of those babies, like Sam, born in the weeks and months following September 11th, 2001, are now beginning college or entering the workforce. Others, like Sammy, are seniors in high school. Regardless, with the 18th anniversary of September 11th occurring this month, those children who came into the world in the wake of the greatest terrorist event ever to happen on American soil, they are coming of age. Now, young adults, they are driving, they are working, they are in school, and they will be voting. I recently read that 13 of them just graduated from the Fire Department Fire Academy in New York City. Those 13 grew up without a parent because one of their parents died on September 11th. Of course, neither Sammy nor his classmates remember 9/11 or that crisp fall Tuesday morning, the cloudless deep blue sky, the sun shining down, the long autumn shadows casting patterns of light and darkness on the late summer lawns, and the fall mums in full bloom. They will not remember how, against the magnificent canvas of natural light, a bitter grief fell over our entire country, a tragic darkness that changed our nation and our world forever. Sammy and our 2001 babies have grown up hearing about terrorists who hijacked 4 large commercial flights, and they have seen photos and videos of that tragic day. They go with their families, with their schools, with their synagogue or church groups to visit the 9/11 Museum at Ground Zero. They watch their parents and grandparents and older siblings relive those awful days. They learn while we remember. These kids born into an America in which terror and violence, guns and mass shootings would be not the exception, but the new normal. Many were raised by ambivalent parents who, like my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, 18 years ago, were delighted with the joy of new life, but at the same time, terrified about raising children in a world of fear, destruction, and chaos. 18 years ago, as our family boarded a plane for Florida to attend Sammy's Brit Milah, the change in the world order was palpable. One of the 9/11 babies, who is turning 18, captures it best. As fear grows, so do security measures. I can't imagine a world without checkpoints and metal detectors at concerts, sporting events, and schools, and even synagogues. How easy it was 18 years ago to enter any building, to arrive at the airport and walk right onto the plane. But in this new reality, kids like my nephew Sammy have always taken their shoes off when passing through security in the United States airport. They have lived with the ever-present reality of TSA and the Department of Homeland Security, and may not even understand that these organizations emerged as a byproduct of 9/11. While there have been extraordinary moments of fleeting patriotism since 2001, flag-waving, singing, solidarity marches, and demonstrations, there has also been an overwhelming loss of confidence in the power of the United States government to protect its people, in the judgment of our leaders and authority figures, in the efficacy of organized religion, in the benevolence of strangers, and in the trustworthiness of those in our country whose skin is black or brown, who speak English with a foreign accent, who wear a hijab or burqa, a kippah, sari, or turban. Our post-9/11 world is characterized by fear of and disdain for others. The xenophobia, the fear of strangers, that we will atone for next week on Yom Kippur has increased in the past 18 years against so many who perceive themselves as we do, as others. Yes, that's right. We are sometimes others. According to a recent Pew Research report, assaults against Muslims in the U.S. has increased by 50%, and anti-Semitism in the United States is at one of the highest levels since the ADL began tracking this data in the 1970s. In the past 4 years, there has been a 100% increase in anti-Semitic incidents, including crimes of assault, harassment, and vandalism. Particularly disturbing, Massachusetts, our Commonwealth, ranks among the top 4 states in which anti-Semitic events have occurred most frequently in the past 2 years. The most recent incident took place just a couple of weeks ago at the historic Fort Revere Park in Hull, where vandals painted swastikas, messages advocating violence against Jews, using the slogan, Hitler 2020. African Americans, Latinos, and other people of color have also not been spared. In the Jewish community, we are all too familiar with how a lack of understanding easily becomes fear, and how fear evolves into hatred. Ultimately, September 11th, 2001 robbed Americans of the pervasive idealism that celebrates America as a melting pot for all people. That since its founding has meant freedom and opportunity for those of different religions, ethnicities, and cultures. Americans have generally felt safe here. As journalist Minda Zetlin points out, other than a 1993 attack on the World Trade Center towers and the events of 9/11, no foreign power has successfully attacked the United States since Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. And prior to 1941, one must go back to the Revolutionary War to discover the last time a foreign power had succeeded in attacking the continental United States. So at the dawn of this new year, 5780, I suggest that we pray and hope together for the following wisdom: to relearn how to trust one another, to restore our confidence in authority figures, to teach our children and grandchildren not only to have faith in leaders, but to become leaders themselves, to give hope to Sammy's generation, born on the heels of a tragic moment in history. Is there a way to recover the innocence that seemed to die along with nearly 3,000 lives that day? The Dalai Lama once said, "To earn trust, money and power aren't enough. You have to show some concern for others. You cannot buy trust in the supermarket. Ironically, as our country was attacked 18 years ago from the outside, we also shattered on the inside too. Our values were hijacked right along with the four planes. The result is that we have moved inward, away from the epicenters of American life. We have found reason to curtail volunteer work, to limit our kids' activities to only those that are resume building, but not necessarily character building. We have given ourselves and our children over to worry, cynicism, and despair, just as Abraham did in our Torah reading this morning, giving his son Isaac over to a voice calling out to him, demanding him to sacrifice his beloved child on an altar of wood and flames and smoke. And so 18 years later, we need inspiration as we watch our 18-year-old 9/11 babies leave the safety of their homes and their communities for college or the workforce. How will they fare as young adults? How will they take care of themselves and each other away from the protective presence of parents and grandparents who have raised them in the shadow of those towers? Some missing a father or mother, an aunt, uncle, sibling, cousin, or friend. For in the final analysis, we cannot subsist alone. We cannot live in isolation, hidden and afraid, waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next mass shooting to take place, the next tower to fall, the next airplane to drop from the sky. As survivors and as people that seeks to be resilient, we need now more than ever bridges and connections and the company of others. We need trust, confidence, optimism, kindness, and concern. We need care and we need to be cared for. We need to turn to one another and not away from one another. We need to be vulnerable in order to be whole. The past 18 years have been punctuated by loss. There have been many moments of despair and brokenness. The pools of water at Ground Zero represent the dark and deep journeys of the victims of 9/11 and their families down to the depths of the abyss. But Ground Zero is also a place of renewed hope and building and life. When we gaze at these pools, we see our own reflections. We see the colors of Lower Manhattan. Out of the very abyss, we see a new generation of Americans of all religions and colors and nationalities and cultures standing on the shoulders of those who came before them. How many times in our history, our Jewish history, has the smoke of destruction been transformed into rays of sunshine and hope? As a people, we must reach within ourselves and find just enough strength to seek out a fellow traveler, to make a friend, to rekindle a relationship. 18 years. For Jews, 18 carries healing and continuity. 18, the number 18, is life, the time it takes to go from birth to adulthood. And 18 times 2, as we know, is 36. According to Rabbi Eliezer in the Talmud, 36 is the number of times that the Torah warns against the wronging of a ger, a stranger. Think of it. We are told once to love our neighbors as ourselves, but 36 times to embrace the stranger. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs writes, there is only one reply strong enough to answer that question. Why should I not hate the stranger? The reply, because this stranger is me. Tom Roston, author of The Most Spectacular Restaurant in the World, The Twin Towers, Windows on the World, and the Rebirth of New York shares the following story. Windows on the World opened in 1976 at the top of the World Trade Center when it was a low point in New York City's history. But the restaurant quickly moved from being a controversial confection to being a beloved icon on top of the world's most famous skyline. At 5 in the morning on September 11th, 2001, one of the chefs, Chimbo, got up and quietly left for work around 5:30 in the morning. Normally, he would kiss his wife, Soria. She was still asleep, and he didn't want to wake her that morning. So as he drove away, Soria got up and went to the window and said, "Goodbye, my love." The Windows on the World staff of 400 included immigrants like Chimbo from more than 24 countries. On 9/11, Chimbo was one of the 73 restaurant's employees who died, along with 6 men working on a renovation job there and 91 guests. So this past June, Soria took the train from Queens to the North Reflecting Pool, which stands inside the footprint of the North Tower. Soria loyally goes there every September 11th, but she felt like being there this year for her husband's birthday. She brought a flower and a birthday card on which she wrote, "To the love of my life, happy birthday to you, and surprise, you didn't know I was coming today." She arrived around lunchtime and placed the card and the flower on his name, cut in bronze. And then she stepped back a little and stood amid the flow of tourists. She watched people open the card and read it. Some were moved to tears. Some put their hands on their hearts. They didn't need to talk. Soria quietly watched for hours. You see, Soria thought, all these people, they've come here for your birthday. As evening approached, Soria was looking for a moment when she could be alone with her husband so she could sing him happy birthday. But people just kept coming. And at that moment, 4 American women, perhaps about 18 years old, read the card and began to sing happy birthday. Soria walked up to them and said, "Thank you so much. Thank you." They asked her how she was related to the memorial, and she told them, "He was my husband. I was going to sing to him." The young women asked Soria if they could join her in singing to him, and she liked the idea. They sang happy birthday together. They cried together. "I felt peace in my heart," Soria said. Rawson concludes his story. Nearly a generation has grown up since 9/11, but Windows on the World is still bringing strangers together to share a common New York moment that they will never, ever forget. At the conclusion of this morning's Torah section, we read, Abraham went back to his servants, and they got up and set out together for Beersheba. After taking part in such a traumatic event, Abraham counted on his servants, perhaps some could even be considered strangers, to travel home with him, to console him, to help in his recovery from that traumatic event. And then we read, and Abraham settled in Beersheba. Vayeshev Avraham b'Beersheba. Now, typically we would think that this means that Abraham pitched his tent in Beersheba. But if we look closely at the Hebrew, it could also mean that Abraham settled, became settled himself, healed himself, and with the help of others, went from trauma to resilience and established a great nation. Over the next 10 days, let us use the memory of 9/11, the experience of our 9/11 babies like my nephew Sam, and the power of our faith to reach out to those around us, to find solace, to find healing, and ultimately to find hope. Amen.